Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the what if.
Chapter 24. Care Package. Grand Line. Going Merry. What did it mean that the devil fruits contained a literal devil? What did it mean for them that Chopper had a long-forgotten type of ninjutsu? What did Sasuke's fundamental discoveries actually lead him to understand about the world? He was disappointed to find that the answer was, at first, not much. Sasuke was quite willing to try and teach Chopper what he knew about chakra, but the control over earth and water that would be necessary to teach him any elemental ninjutsu was really more Sakura's purview, to be honest. He had no idea how to begin teaching someone the art of wood, and he obviously had no copied techniques to even start from. For now, this led him to focus on the other question. What had he learned about the devil fruits? That the tailed beasts and the devil fruits were somehow related, that seemed obvious enough. But where, exactly, did either of these things come from? Why did the tailed beasts only appear in the elemental kingdoms? Why did the devil fruits appear only on the outside? Sasuke could remember being taught that the Sage of Six Paths had eaten a fruit from the Tree of Life and granted chakra to all the people of the world, but he didn't remember anything in that story about the sage turning into a rubber man or a crazy animal person. Sasuke attempted to ponder this matter with Naruto, but then changed his mind. Naruto was only barely interested in the subject, despite the fact that it concerned his own powers. The rest of the crew was out for similar reasons. Normally he could rely on Sakura to provide a second intellectually invested voice to a mystery, but she wasn't here, was she? No, wait, maybe there was someone else he could talk to. He found Robin reading in the lady's bedroom. A knock at the door caused her to open it without getting up from her seat, a single hand blossoming and disappearing without effort. What is it, curious one? She asked, not looking up from her current book. I found an odd mystery that relates to the devil fruits, and I'm having trouble demystifying it. I understand you're a historian. Can you answer some questions about the world out here? Robin paused, blinking for a moment, as if she had finally begun paying attention, then closed her book with a snap. Certainly. I'd be more than willing. Soon, they were sitting by the tangerine trees on the upper deck, with Robin taking a chair and Sasuke sitting in the grass. She was bandaged in a number of places, but if she was still truly hurting then she hid it well. Sasuke decided he might as well just start talking. I discovered that consuming a devil fruit creates a small demon that resides in a space connected to one's chakra pathways, he said, as Robin stared at him. This is similar to certain things we see in the elemental kingdoms, but I can't figure out if the two are actually related. The beautiful woman continued to stare directly at him, not saying a word. Eventually, he felt a blush rising up, so he coughed to clear his throat. Before he could say anything else, she spoke up. How certain of this are you? She asked. Very. I saw the one inside Chopper with my own eyes. It was a human-shaped demon of black and green fire. It tried to speak to me, but I broke the connection before it did so. She closed her eyes, then looked off toward the ocean. I see. Am I correct in assuming that there are no devil fruits in the land you came from? You assume correctly. There is a common rumor among the credulous that the devil fruits contain a literal demon that gives us our powers, she said, holding out one arm that blossomed into a spread of other delicate limbs like a paper fan unfolding, before they all faded away. I had assumed that in time a more mundane explanation would surface. It's very interesting that I would hear otherwise. Sasuke turned to gaze out at the ocean as well, but there was nothing there except sea and clouds. The thing is, he said, we have something like these demons as well. They're extremely rare, only 9 of them exist, but Naruto himself had one sealed inside of him as an infant. Oh, she asked, turning his way. He's displayed no strange abilities so far, at least when compared to you. No, they don't normally manifest that way. They're sealed with techniques that allow its holder to draw upon the demon's power directly. Naruto has access to tens, or even hundreds of times as much chakra as a normal ninja of his age and training, but the only effects on his body are the facial markings you see as well as increased ability to heal from wounds. Interesting. Perhaps less useful to those of us without access to your techniques to draw upon, she said. True, but, while the creatures seem to be similar, the demon inside Naruto, the Kyuubi, as on a completely different level from the demons inside the devil fruits. Looking at the two of them is like comparing a lit match to a bonfire. It makes me wonder if they're actually connected at all. Robin shook her head, then turned back to fix him with her sharp gaze. Don't be mistaken. Some devil fruits, and their owners, are fundamentally incomparable. If you assume all of these fruits are on the same level as the three aboard this ship, you would be terribly wrong. Sasuke closed his eyes and nodded. I see. I suppose that makes sense. He paused. But that leads me to my next question. Where do these devil fruits ultimately come from? Now, Robin showed some actual emotion, laughing that musical laugh of hers. Answer that question, curious one, and you will have earned a place at any center of learning in the world. Sasuke sighed, letting his head fall backward to hit the earth. I was afraid you'd say that. I suppose the only thing I have to go on is the legend of the sage, then. Pardon. I don't suppose they teach you about the sage of six paths out here, do they? Robin shook her head, now looking curiously back at him, so he continued. We have a legend that says that nearly 1,000 years ago a man known only as the Sage of Six Paths consumed a fruit from the divine tree. With the power of that fruit, he saved the world from some unspecified destruction and at the same time granted the power of chakra to everyone across the entire planet. He stayed behind with us and taught the foundations of what would later become ninjutsu and bushido. There was silence. Eventually, Sasuke sat up again and looked back her way. She was staring at him intently, just like she had the first time they had met. What? He asked, distinctly uncomfortable. When she spoke, she did so carefully. How long ago, exactly, did you say this occurred? I'm afraid no one knows. It was a chaotic time, apparently, but everything I've heard suggests it was somewhere between 900 and 1,000 years ago. Robin breathed in sharply, then let out her breath in a sigh. That's very interesting to me. We have a similar period in our history. A period of 100 years, called the Void Century, that began roughly 1,000 years ago, during which there exist no records. Nothing at all, save for the stones that I study. Everything else has been obliterated by the world government. She paused. Except, apparently, an unusual legend passed down on an unknown island. That's interesting. Isn't it just? Do you know anything else about that time period? I'm sorry, I don't. The history of our land was very fragmented after that time. Robin sighed, then resumed looking away. I suppose I may have to visit this mysterious island of yours one day. Then, she stood up. I'm sorry, but I have to think about this. Without a further word, she left, leaving Sasuke alone. Somewhat unnerved by this strange conversation, Sasuke went down to the other deck to speak with Naruto. Heya, Sasuke. How's it going? Enjoying hanging out with your girlfriend? She's not my. Sasuke was interrupted when Naruto broke out into laughter. Okay, sure, fine, go ahead and laugh, Sasuke said. Clearly, a year of not being around Naruto had made him rusty. He tried searching for a change of subject. Yeah, he had a good one. Naruto, we have to talk about the supply situation. I don't know about you, but I used up pretty much every piece of ranged weaponry I had during that last fight. Oh, hey, yeah, thanks for reminding me. Far from sounding concerned, Naruto actually sounded excited. Yeah, I was gonna do something about that, but I got sidetracked by the whole staff business. You were going to do what, exactly? Naruto looked extremely proud at his friend's confusion. I've got everything handled, man. The toads have a lot of extra stuff stored for me, and I can get them to bring anything basic as a favor, ya know. Really? That's very helpful. I'd hate to be a shinobi with no tools. Yeah, here, let me show you. Jiraiya sensei taught me a few tricks that are pretty much only for people like me who've got super chakra. Like summoning without blood. Naruto clapped both hands together and, in a puff of smoke, a sturdy-looking toad appeared, loaded down with packs. It was hard to tell, but the blue toad looked female somehow. She had packs strapped to her back, waist, chest, head, limbs, and, in a few places she even had packs tied onto other packs. Naruto. The toad shouted, it's so good to see ya. Glad you're still doing alright out here. Thanks. You're looking healthy, too, Auntie Yuma. Good to see you again. He turned to Sasuke, beginning introductions. Sasuke, this is Yumagama, who helped me out during my training. Yuma, this is my best friend, Uchiha Sasuke. Both bowed in greeting, though the toad's efforts were hampered somewhat by all the packs. Quickly, she began unloading some of them with a practiced ease. Now, Naruto boy, I've got exactly what ya need ready right here. I knew it wouldn't be long till ya called for help, all lost out at sea, so I've got all the comforts and weapons of home fare ya. Don't hesitate to call anytime ya need something special, alright? Thanks a lot, Yuma. That really saves my butt, ya know. No problem, but that reminds me, there's something else I need to give ya before I go. Saying this, Yumagama rummaged around in a waterproof pack that hung behind her head where a human might have had hair, pulling out a delicately wrapped scroll. Here ya go, hun. Naruto took the scroll with a puzzled frown. What's this for? Not fair me to say, hun. Now I've gotta get going so I don't miss the daytime specials, ya hear? Good luck to ya. That said, she disappeared in a puff of smoke. The scroll they had been handed was wrapped in a red and gold design. Since it was hand-delivered by the toads, it was, presumably, safe. Still, there was no indication of its sender. Puzzled, Naruto and Sasuke opened the scroll and began to read. The message began. Dearest Naruto and Sasuke. You must have a death wish, because after what you've done I'm going to literally rip both of your heads off and leave them for the birds. Oh, shouted Naruto, this must be from Sakura. Sasuke grimaced, but they continued. I hope you think very, very carefully about that promise, because I'm coming for you. Team 7 never leaves anyone behind, and apparently it's going to be my job to come to the rescue this time. I assume that this will be necessary because the only reason I can imagine that you two would hair off and leave across the ocean without me is that you were kidnapped by rogue agents while on fire. Anyway, since Jiraiya was so pleased to help me send you this message by Toad Mail, I don't have to be quite so circumspect about current events. Everyone's worried about these ships from the outside world, and opinion is split on whether we should isolate ourselves or not. Kakashi thinks we should be sending scouting parties out there so that we know what's what when the daimyo finally decides he wants to start trading missions. Still, the Hokage still hasn't been chosen, and I don't like the look of things here. There are some real creeps crawling out of the woodwork, and no one I'd trust is exactly itching for the job. That said, I may or may not have convinced my teacher, Tsunade of the Sannin, to return to the village, and she's great. It was really tough just getting her to train me, but I think all the lying, cheating, and blackmail was worth it. You both would like her. She's an amazing healer, which might come in handy after I'm through with you. Still, I wasn't supposed to leave, and she's already on the warpath because I ran away without permission and then sprinted back to the village for 2 days without rest because certain team members of mine had just walked right off into the ocean, so she might kill me first. Anyway, watch yourselves. No one's happy that you took it upon your own authority to chase after Akatsuki, and I wouldn't put it past some of the current crop of contenders to send a squad your way just to prove they mean business. But, really, that's not all that important, since I'm going to get to you first. Again, I'm coming for you. Be careful, you assholes. Love, Haruno Sakura. P.S. Looks like I might have some help after all. That's worrying, said Sasuke. Yeah, wonder what all that means. Oh, Naruto, there's more. Sure enough, below the letter's end, there was another bit of writing. PPS. PPS, said Naruto. Did she make a mistake? There's nothing after it. It's just blank. Keep going. Maybe there's more. Naruto began rapidly unrolling the remainder of the scroll. I'm telling you, man, it's all blank. There's nothing here except. At that moment, Naruto's rapid unfurling revealed a paper tag hidden inside that was covered in ink and symbols. Both boys had just enough time to cry out in shock and dive for cover when the explosive tag did what it did best: it exploded. A small concussive blast sent Naruto crashing into the mast, and Sasuke went flying out into the open ocean. Battered and lightly singed, Naruto raised his head briefly, then passed out. On the upper deck, Sanji turned his head to the offending noise, tapping out his cigarette over the waters. Lady Troubles. Huh. Yeah, it's a tough world. Chapter 25. The winter lights. Going merry. It was the dead of night when something woke the crew up. Arms that tapped, poked, prodded, or shoved everyone that had been sleeping. Groggy eyes opened wide in surprise, and startled shouts were muffled by a hand that drifted gently over their mouths. Once the crew had had a chance to look around them, the hands pointed the way to the deck. Then, with a musical sound and a puff of flower petals, the arms disappeared. It seemed as though Robin wanted them to see something. The night was crystal clear without a single cloud, and every bit of its blackness was stuffed full to bursting with stars. As the Straw Hats Naruto and Sasuke included stepped out into the cool night air, they saw those stars paint for them. The sky was alive with fire in every color of the rainbow that stretched and shimmered about as they watched. The pigments danced, twisting around each other in a brilliant light show. As a group, the crew seemed to lose their breath, puffs of air showing up in the chill. Chopper was the first to make a noise, squealing with delight. It's the Aurora. The Aurora Hibernus. I haven't seen it since I left home. This is amazing, said Nami. I've read about this in my books, but I've never. Usopp's jaw dropped. What is this? What causes it? Sanji flicked his lighter on to light one of his ever-present cigarettes, then looked dismally at the shadows his light was casting about him. With a click, he flicked the lighter closed, and put his cigarette away. Zoro just stood alone, watching the sky silently with his arms crossed as the lights reflected in his eyes. Sasuke's mouth hung open in an amused smile, a silent chuckle escaping his lips. Naruto's grin reached his ears. I've never seen anything like this in my life. You say these happen at your home island, little guy. I might have to visit sometime. Okay, said Chopper. Doctorine said that I had to ask permission to bring home girls, but boys were always fine with her. Throughout all of this, Luffy had just stared at it all, an expression of wonder on his face. Then he stretched, grabbing onto the top spar of the ship above the mainsail. With one hand stretched out to the top of the mast for balance, he steadied himself up there, watching all of the light show from just that little bit closer to the sky. It's beautiful, isn't it? Said Robin's voice from beside him. It happens sometimes around winter islands. We must be passing one by. When Luffy turned to look, he saw her tucked away inside the crow's nest. She sat there above it all with a blanket, a cooling mug of tea, a couple of books, and an enigmatic smile. Robin, called Nami from below, you woke us up for this. Thank you. Robin didn't move, except to smile a bit wider. A single arm sprouted from the mast below, waving her acknowledgement. A return to sleep was on no one's agenda for now. At Usopp's suggestion, an official crew campfire meeting was called to order, at least until Sanji reminded him that wood and pitch were extremely flammable, at which point all the blankets were retrieved from the beds and storage instead. Sanji prepared hot, spiced beverages that warmed them in other suspicious ways as well. Luffy called for music. Then when no one volunteered, he began whining about their lack of a musician. The ship rocked gently along in the waters and they all simply talked, sitting together under the glowing night sky. The night went on, and Naruto and Sasuke couldn't help themselves. They felt at home. See, this is what a pirate's life should be all about, said Usopp, spirits bolstered by the general cheer as well as the drink. Don't you think so? Hey, Naruto, Sasuke. How are you liking being pirates for a change? Honestly, pretty nice, said Naruto. We're not really pirates, though, said Sasuke. You think not? You might as well be, said Sanji, pointing a finger in their direction. You're spending all your day on a ship, hanging out with wanted criminals. If you're waiting for us to go raid a port for rum or go keelhaul some poor bastard, then sure, you're out of luck, but out here that definition's pretty wide. You're both pirates, agreed Luffy. I knew it from the moment I saw you. Luffy, that doesn't make sense, said Nami, bundled up in the corner alongside the ever-fuzzy Chopper. They said they hadn't been on a sailing ship at all until ours came along. How could they have been pirates? Nami, this and that are two completely different things. They're off on an adventure just like the rest of us, said Luffy. Nami sighed, but she didn't press the issue. Naruto laughed. Okay, so, Sasuke and me, we've been trying to figure out why you're all out here, you know. We were waiting for the other shoe to drop. So, an adventure. What's the deal with you guys? That's right, shouted Usopp, raising one hand to the glowing sky. It's all about the dream. You've got to have a dream if you want to be on board. That's the rules. A dream? Asked Sasuke. Yes. Mine is to become a great warrior of the sea. My legend grows larger with each retelling. Sasuke shook his head at the sniper's drunkenness. A smile on his face, he asked, is that true for each of you? In the order we joined. Called Luffy, I'm going to become the Pirate King. I'll be as great as Gold Roger. Zoro. Greatest swordsman in the world. It's that or nothing. Usopp glanced at Nami, who hesitated before continuing the chain. I'm making the first truly accurate map of the ocean. Greatest sniper in the world. Shouted Usopp. I'm gonna find all blue, a sea that holds all the fish and ingredients in the world, said Sanji. Of course, preparing it all for lovely ladies is crucial as well. I want to become a doctor that can cure any illness, stammered Chopper. There was silence for a moment. Hey, Robin, shouted Luffy, what about you? More silence greeted them as they looked expectantly up at the crow's nest. Finally. I can't say I have one, really, responded Robin, from up above. Usopp expressed his slightly inebriated disbelief by accidentally spilling some of his drink on himself. What I mean you don't have one. Everyone's got one, right? What about those big stones you were looking at? You know, archaeology. A long pause. That never really was a dream, as I think you all would call it. It was just the only thing I had left. Though, I suppose it's funny you should mention Gold Roger, Luffy. He wrote a message in the golden bell back on Jaya. Wherever that bell came from up in the sky, he visited there as well. Shouted Luffy, easily distracted by her change of subject. Gold Roger. What did it say? It said, I have come so far, and I will carry this passage with me to the farthest ends of the world. It seems as though he could read the poneglyphs as well. It's a strange thing, don't you think? But, what about your dream? Asked Chopper, up into the starry night. No one could see Robin as she sat above them all. It's all right, Mr. Doctor, she said, not everyone is driven by such things. There was another pause. Though, I do wonder about our newer recruits. What, us? Asked Naruto. Hey, well, I guess mine's easy, if you wanna call it that. I'm gonna be the Hokage of Konoha someday, just like my father. That's kind of like the leader, or the strongest ninja in the village. As for Sasuke. Yeah, I don't really have a dream either, Sasuke interjected. No, cried Usopp, no more chickening out. You have to say it. Slowly, Naruto began laughing. It grew louder and louder in the silent night until he was clutching his sides and falling over himself. What is it now, Naruto? Asked Sasuke, fearing the worst. You're right, he's just an embarrassed chicken. Oh man, Naruto continued wheezing. Well, okay, now I have to know, muttered Nami, if dressing like a girl doesn't do it, then what's going to embarrass our little Mr. Cool Guy over here? Naruto struggled to calm down. Okay, so, when our 3-person team formed, back when we were, like, 12, our teacher tried the same thing, you know. Like, what is your dream for the future? Oh no, please don't bring this up, winced Sasuke. And he goes. Now Naruto put on a serious face, dropping into his best impression of his friend's more careful speech patterns. I don't have a dream for the future. But my ambition is to kill a certain man. Suddenly, Naruto's face split and he resumed cackling. Sasuke had his face in his hands. Oh, hell, kill me now, I was such a child. For some reason, this set the whole crew off. Even Robin could be heard laughing from up above. He was just trying to show off in front of the new girl, too. Laughed Naruto, he thought he was so cool. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Naruto. Nami wiped a tear from her eyes, grinning as she spoke. Yeah, I could tell he's a big show-off. No surprises there after he was putting the moves on me back at Jaya. As Sanji's face darkened, Sasuke's eyes shot open. Whoa, that wasn't me putting the moves on you, I was just. Watch yourself, interrupted Sanji, foot up ass. Fuzzy slippers. Remember that. Sasuke just groaned and shook his head. After things calmed down again, Naruto gave an ultimatum. Come on, man, you have to give them something, or else I'll keep digging this stuff up. You know I have even more dirt on you, right? Said Sasuke with mortified exasperation. Yeah, but the difference is that I'm shameless. Come on, you know I'm right. Sasuke sighed. After a moment, he came to a conclusion. Well, if it will put this to rest, then I guess there is something. I kind of always wanted to see the world. My brother and I talked about it, before he died. Your brother died? Asked Chopper. How did it happen? My family was killed when I was very young. We used to be part of a big clan, but almost every one of us was killed on the same night. My brother died fighting off the attackers. The man we saw on your ship the night we met was their leader. That's who I was talking about wanting to kill. That's terrible, said the young reindeer. In the night, the others watched Sasuke with greater or lesser degrees of sympathy. My brother was a great ninja. Well known and extremely powerful. A genius. That's what they called him. I looked up to him so much, but in the end this eye is all I have left of him. Sasuke pointed to his left eye. Whoa, what? Asked Usopp. You took his eye. He gave it to me. It's kind of like a weapon that he passed down to me to replace one I lost that night. Huh, remarked Zoro. Hell of a way to remember someone. But I kept my friend's sword after they died, so I guess it's not too weird. What? Asked Nami. No, first of all, that's very weird, and second of all, you never told us that before. Pretty sure I did, said Zoro. No, you didn't. Whatever. So, continued Sasuke, my eyes are both mine and my brother's. It's a bit silly, but it kind of makes me feel like everything I see with them is for both of us, you know. Of course, the world is a lot bigger than I thought it was. That reminds me, I've heard the name Gold Roger passed around just now. Are you talking about Goldie Roger? How do you know that name? Asked Sanji. My brother sort of left me a message where he talked to me about a man with that name. Apparently Roger visited our country when my brother was very young, and he got to meet him. What? Exclaimed Luffy, your brother met Gold Roger. And you have his eye. So that I saw Gold Roger. Luffy, calm down, said Nami. Yes, he was the most famous man in the world. He was executed by the world government a number of years back, but not before he set the world on fire with talk of his legendary treasure trove that he left in some unknown location. She pointed at Luffy. That's what made this oddball set out to sea and start collecting all of us. Luffy nodded with excitement. Despite the upbeat tone, Sasuke couldn't help but feel somewhat disappointed. Oh, so he's dead, then. My brother, Itachi, said that Roger had invited him to join the crew when he grew up. Said that he'd make a great pirate one day, if he wanted to be. From the message Itachi left me, I think my brother hoped that I'd. Sasuke glanced over to Naruto. He'd almost said, join up with him in his place. Well, that I'd get a chance to meet him myself someday. That's fine, exclaimed Luffy. I'm aiming to become king of the pirates, and I'll be the next Gold Roger. Being part of this crew's the next best thing. Sasuke laughed, surprising himself. Ha, no, I don't think that will work. We don't get much freedom as ninja, and I'm already part of a team. He looked to Naruto. Yeah, said Naruto, as ninja, we have a lot of restrictions that we're kind of bending pretty far right now to be out here. Usually, going pretty much anywhere outside of our country could get us killed. For an Uchiha like myself, it's even worse. There are plenty of people who'd kill me to take my eyes. Not to mention all the people in my village who'd sooner kill me than look at me. I have to admit, this trip out here has been amazing. No one even knows me. Wait, people don't like you in your village? Asked Usopp, still rather drunk, but you've got such a lovable personality. He burst into a fit of laughter. Sasuke chuckled, his smile bitter. No, my clan was killed because people thought we were going to betray them. I'm one of the very last survivors of a cursed bloodline. There was an uncomfortable silence for a moment, filled only with the creaking of wood and the gentle sounds of the waves. Then Robin surprised them all by speaking from up above. That must have been difficult. No family, no safety. Where would you be, I wonder, if it weren't for your friends? Robin, chided Nami, don't be so morbid all the time. No, it's all right, said Sasuke. I'm grateful for Naruto and Sakura. Without them I don't know where I'd be. Dead, or lost to hatred, or worse. Or maybe I would have run away from the village. He glanced at Naruto again as he said this. Yeah, well, we both made the best of what we had, you know, said Naruto, before he perked up. Speaking of leaving the village, I was having the weirdest dream while I was sleeping just now. You'd run off, Sasuke, so Sakura and I were trying to find you. So we got this special beetle from what's his name, you know, the bug guy. Anyway, the beetle could track you by your scent. So we got some of your stuff to give to it, but right before it started sniffing around I ended up farting on it, so it just flew around stuck to my butt the whole time. That's when I woke up. Usopp and Luffy both laughed out loud at this, but Sasuke just looked vaguely disturbed by the story. Naruto continued talking. Anyway, he said, the point is that we're family, even when we're not together, and even if we both lost our first families. Well, you're in good company here, I guess, said Nami. I think most of us here have grown up alone in some way. There was nodding all around the circle and a chorus of agreement. After a moment, Nami frowned and started looking around at everyone. Wait, I said. Most of us, but did anyone here actually have a normal home life? I know about Usopp, Sasuke, and Chopper, but what about the rest of you? Sanji shook his head. Kitchen rat since I was 6 years old, then I started working for the shitty old man. Don't look at me, said Naruto. My parents died the day I was born. No parents, said Zoro. Didn't need 'em. I have a brother, said Luffy. You have a brother, exclaimed Naruto and Sasuke. No, we're not doing that gag right now, interrupted Nami. Robin, what about you? I suppose I'm in the same situation as all of you, she said. Every one of us, huh? Mused Nami. Guess that might explain why we're all so odd. Maybe that's why everyone on this ship starts to feel like family after a while. To friends and family, called Usopp, raising his glass, and to the merry is our home. Everyone seemed willing to drink to this. As the night moved on, they slowly passed out of the winter area. The cool air began to warm and the night's lights began to fade. Bit by bit, the crew either moved back to bed or simply passed out where they were laying. Robin was the last to sleep, secretly smiling, but filled with a nameless worry that refused to leave her. Chapter 26. The Navy Blues. Sasori of the Red Sands stalked across the strange island that he found himself on, his puppet's immense wooden shell lumbering along as he investigated his current target. Someone else had been on board their ship when they had descended from the sky. Whether the rest of their group liked it or not, he felt a certain personal responsibility for their ship's condition. In many ways, the wooden vessel they had acquired had become very much like another puppet to him. Perhaps it was his largest one yet, but it was just one more shell between him and the outside world. It could even be said that he felt a bit possessive towards it. That someone had snuck inside his new vessel without even announcing themselves in the one period that he had slackened his security to focus on repairs, it irked him. Whoever it was would pay for their presumption. Taking advantage of the opportunity that this affront afforded him to avoid the ridiculous antics that Toby was getting the rest of their group involved in, he had informed their leader of his thoughts and then left to hunt down this mysterious interloper. Toby had been difficult to read, as usual. Unlike the others, Sasori was convinced there was more behind Toba's guileless expression than was immediately apparent. Just because he respected Toba's power and knowledge didn't mean he trusted his goals. People always put on masks, after all. So, now he was following a trail so faint that even a veteran tracker would have called it an impossible feat. Things had grown a bit easier once he realized that his target hadn't actually been bothering to hide his tracks at all. He simply appeared to be using a proxy to do his infiltration for him. An animal, a puppet, a creation of chakra, Sasori wasn't quite certain which it was yet, but whatever manner of creature had just left their ship, it was so tiny that it felt little need to hide its tracks. It didn't matter. He would find it, and then he would use every trick of chakra in his arsenal to find the infiltrator's owner. The island he was on was sparsely vegetated, populated with very long, or very tall, depending on how you looked at it, trees and animals. The odd proportions of these creatures were unusual, but hardly so unusual as to unnerve a veteran like him. Regardless, the open ground left his target very little opportunity to evade him. Having extended numerous whisker-thin tools from underneath his tremendous scorpion-like Hiroko puppet, his new appendages brushed and flicked their way across the earth in search of every mark that his target left behind. There was a disturbance in the ground. Carefully, he traced the surface with one of his fine instruments, feeling the delicate feedback through the chakra strings that vibrated with almost painful clarity. Sasori only bothered smiling when someone was there to observe it. Nevertheless, he felt a surge of satisfaction pulse through his remaining organic parts. A man had been here. Moments before, that man had been something like a mouse. Not a creation at all, then, but a transformative ability so powerful that it could significantly reduce its user's size and yet retain full mobility. Interesting. Sasori considered this carefully. A man who could transform into something the size of a rodent should have been a difficult opponent to track, but it appears that his target had made a mistake. Returning to human form while Akatsuki was still on the island was a truly absurd error, the height of overconfidence, and now Sasori had a solid trail to follow. Chakra strings still reaching out to connect his nervous system to the numerous artificial eyes he had implanted along the Hiroko puppet's body, he continued to track his prey, carefully watching the landscape. About an hour later he felt confident he was growing close. The man had stopped and waited for unknown reasons on a number of occasions, but now all of a sudden the mouse man had made a connection with another person. A newcomer. There was another set of footprints that had arrived from the south, walking alongside a bicycle. Sasori spared a glance around at the uninhabited landscape. Strange environment for such a device. The newcomer's footprints showed smooth, impractical soles, but they had very large feet. Sasori wanted to say that from the depths of the imprints left behind the newcomer would be a thoroughly muscled male, or perhaps merely obese, but he had seen enough strangely shaped people out here that he was by no means confident of this assessment. Going only by footprint depth alone, the newcomer could, for example, also be a 10-foot tall man who was thin but athletically built. There was very little way to tell. The man was walking a bicycle, so his stride would be altered beyond its natural patterns. After a moment, Sasori noticed something else. The ground was damp. There hadn't been rain recently, but it was as if the newcomer had been dripping wet at one point. Two unknowns on the island, then. His target and the newcomer. After this point the two had split up, with the target leaving the area straight ahead and the other man. The other man had left at a lazy walking pace back in the general direction that Sasori had come from, wheeling his bicycle alongside. Sasori tensed. Assuming that his target had informed the newcomer about Akatsuki's presence, that meant that the newcomer was aware that he was walking towards certain death. Almost unconsciously, he readied his vast assortment of weapons. He hadn't seen anyone else while tracking his target, but if the newcomer had stayed hidden at a considerable distance then it was possible that Sasori's movement had been spotted on the way here. The tracker might have become the tracked. Underneath the vast bulk of his robed Hiroko puppet body, Sasori himself dug into the earth with precise implements. Hiding a smaller body inside a larger puppet gave him certain advantages when it came to subterfuge, but the young-looking, red-haired doll that served as his true body was really only a container for the small metal canister that contained the remainder of his brain and organs necessary for chakra production. Silently, unobserved, he put his true puppet body beneath the earth, leaving only his connections to the Hiroko doll and a couple of artificial eyes that he left partially embedded in the ground above him. Once that had been completed, he let his chakra strings continue to puppeteer the Hiroko doll remotely. In the end, his true body was left buried beneath seemingly undisturbed earth, and the Hiroko body that any observer would have seen remained up above. Apparently satisfied with what it had found, the red and black-robed Hiroko doll got back up and resumed lumbering along after its target. As the doll continued its slow trudge out of sight, Sasori waited, letting some of his smaller puppets and mechanical devices dig away from his earthen cocoon. Each one was a deadly weapon in its own right, extending a network of controlled territory out from his hidden lair. After a few minutes of this effort, the entire landscape around him became like an extension of his own self. He sat like an antlion in its nest, and anyone entering his zone of control would be in his power. Eventually, a man, tall and lanky, appeared on the horizon, having followed Sasori as he had been focused on tracking his target. There was no point to making his puppet smirk, so he didn't. Still, it always paid to be prepared, didn't it? The instant the lanky man stepped in range, Sasori detonated the explosives. Multiple explosive seals erupted from the ground underneath the man, and his environs turned into a firestorm that belched smoke and debris. Sasori could feel the patter of dirt and gravel hitting the ground all across the landscape he controlled. When the smoke finally cleared, the man had been disintegrated from the powerful blast, only a few chunks of his body remaining. It was always better to be safe rather than sorry when you found out you had made a mistake that an opponent could capitalize on. No, wait, the man wasn't dead, he wasn't dead at all, he was just. Grand line. Going merry. The crew first became aware that their day was going to be unusual sometime after they were attacked by a gaggle of gigantic, mischievous sea monkeys. Now, that kind of thing was really par for the course these days, but after they had been fended off, Usopp noticed smoke billowing up from the distant horizon ahead of them. After a bit of worry and confusion, someone thought to ask Robin, who had been up in the crow's nest at the time, if there was something happening. Why, yes, she said, we've been nearing an island for quite some time now. This prompted a crew resolution to have either Usopp or Sasuke be the official lookouts for the near future, instead. All that aside, a new island meant new challenges. Since it was impossible for them to leave each island without the guidance of a log pose, it was also impossible to completely bypass that island, no matter how dangerous it might be. Regardless of what trouble lay ahead, they would need to face it head on, or at the very least slink around until the log pose said they could leave. So it was that the Going Merry weighed anchor at Hell on Earth. The devastation was astounding. Bodies, some unconscious, some barely living, and some dead, littered the ground, and the water was dominated by the ruins of a tremendous ship. Flotsam obscured the ocean's surface, and debris caked the nearby shore. It looked like an entire festival had been torn violently to pieces, and its various huts and stands were still smoking. To make matters even less pleasant, it was terribly chilly and snow was beginning to fall all across the island. Whatever happened here, mused Zoro, watching a still smoldering pile of debris, it happened recently. The rest of the crew could only agree. Everyone was on edge, and some were especially eager to find another spot to land. Eventually, they found a clue hidden among the charred wreckage of what looked to be a makeshift stadium, of sorts. It was a toppled billboard that must have once been 30 feet tall, covered in hastily painted letters and markings. It read, Davy Back Fight. CMXXI. Grand Slam Edition. Foxy Pirates vs. Akatsuki Pirates. Donut Race. Portia. Capote. Manda. Vs. Kisame. Toby. Deidara. Groggy Ring. Pickles. Hamburg. Big Pan. Vs. Hidan. Orochimaru. Danzo. Combat Round. Kakuzu. Vs. Foxy the Great. Shit, muttered Sanji, as Usopp turned suddenly pale. Well, now we know what happened here. I guess this was Akatsuki, said Nami, but what in the world is a Davy Back Fight? You mean you don't know? Replied Usopp. No, I don't. What's going on? It soon became clear that out of all those present only Sanji, Usopp, and Robin knew the particulars. According to legends, Robin lectured, the Davy Back Fight originated on an island known only as Pirates' Paradise, and it is a method of competing over human resources. Those who compete, and most pirates consider it mandatory, are forced into games, combat, and other competitions to steal crew members from another ship. Said Nami, that's quite possibly the most useless thing I've ever heard of. Especially for a crew like us. You'd have to be a real bozo to agree to something like that. Frowning for a moment, she turned to Luffy, adding, Luffy, if you ever enter us in one of those matches, I will make you pay. But, Nami, it sounds fun. I hate to interrupt, said Sasuke, but what if you don't want anyone the other team has? You can't just decline. Usopp spoke up next. No, that's just it. There's always something to play for. If you lose a match and no one wants to steal any of your crew, they take your flag away from you. You can't ever use it again. If you refuse, then everyone will think you're cowards. It's nothing but a cruel game played by stupid jerks. That's right, interjected a wheezing, pained voice from a nearby pile of rubble, and we were the best at it. There was a person buried underneath piles of scattered timber. Skin blackened from smoke, Bleeding from numerous small wounds, and with several broken bones, the oddly shaped man had clearly had a rough day. At first glance it even looked as though his head itself had been split in two, but it soon became clear that it was actually a combination of a strangely shaped skull and an even stranger haircut. As Chopper worked quickly to tend his wounds, the man told his story. The names: Foxy, captain of the Foxy Pirates. I've lost everything. Who knew that after only 920 measly Davy back challenges, I'd finally pick the wrong opponents? He paused, taking a tortured breath. They told me that the man I fought was their accountant. Split head, shouted Luffy, apparently in great distress. Don't talk. You've got to conserve your strength. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that comment about my head. Cough. I survived by slowing my heart and lungs, so they thought I had died, but now. His arm shot up, and, with a gasp of agony, he cried out, "You must avenge me. Kill Akatsuki, then get back my money, and then return it right here. 2. Bury with me." Then, Foxy's eyes closed, and his arm dropped lifelessly to his side. Snow, why is it so cold now? So cold, bleh. Split head. Don't die. Split head. Split head. Each time Luffy called his name, Foxy jerked on the ground, which was making Chopper's job as medic somewhat difficult. Luffy. He needs to stay still. He'll be fine. Just because he went blah doesn't mean he's dead. Naruto and Sasuke were watching this scene with puzzled expressions. I've never seen anyone who looks that weird before, Naruto muttered to his friend. Do you think he's a mutant or something? I guess. There are an awful lot of weird looking people out here, though. Damn it, shouted Luffy. I'm gonna beat the crap out of those jerks for what they did to him. Eventually, Chopper had helped the most wounded victims to his satisfaction, and it came time for the Straw Hats to make a decision. Wherever they were, Akatsuki was gone. Should they search the island to find them? Though the discussion went back and forth, eventually Sasuke made his position clear. It's not going to be pretty if we find them. True, he said, but there are two things that I think are certain. First, this island is small, so if they are still here after all, then we will run into them. Second, if they're the ones who find us rather than the other way around, it'll be painful to say the least. Still, I don't think they're here at all anymore. We should have seen their ship if they were. So, now they traveled in a group across the snow-dusted island, examining the strange flora and fauna with its rather unusual adaptations as they went. Despite the danger, the feeling of excitement from this new island permeated the air. Usopp. Chopper. Look at that stretched out goat. It must be 15 feet long. Shouted Luffy. Whoa. You're right, shouted Usopp. Look over there. Is that a deer? Its antlers are twice as tall as it is. Chopper. Will yours get that big? What? I don't know that. And I'm a reindeer, not a plain deer. Frowning, Chopper paused to look around. Everything on this island seemed long or tall, somehow. The trees themselves were sparse, but extremely tall. Wasn't that strange? He'd thought trees grew tall to compete and get more sunlight. Wait, something else was strange. Hey, everyone, he asked, his voice tentative. I know I'm not really the right person to ask about trees that aren't evergreens, but didn't you say most trees lose their leaves during the winter? Why are these all still green? The crew pondered this. Sudden snow, suggested Usopp. No one had a better answer. As they walked, the landscape grew stranger. It was as though winter had intensified, the temperature slowly dropping as they moved further inland. Here and there ice formations made strange and unnatural shapes that hemmed in their movements. Chopper soon relaxed from his earlier nervousness. He was always more comfortable in cooler climates, and after a long adventure spent in the desert country of Alabasta, he was grateful for the change. But the mood wasn't all cheerful. Robin walked beside him, eyes scanning everywhere for danger. Robin. The small reindeer asked, his hooves making cute little noises as he trotted across the terrain. What's wrong? Are you okay? Robin looked back at him, blinking confusedly, before returning a nervous smile. Yes, I'm fine. I'm just thinking about something. Okay, if you're all right then that's fine. Before long, they encountered more bodies, bloodless but torn to pieces. It appeared as though another especially vicious battle had been fought here. Broken ice was scattered everywhere, and the earth was torn and burnt in numerous areas. Wait, said Sanji, kicking one of the many disembodied limbs that littered the landscape, which rolled off with a clattering sound. Are these things dolls or something? Look, they're made of wood. Sasuke frowned, then activated his Sharingan. Out of habit, he scanned each visible body for any signs of chakra. Here and there he recognized the telltale signs of a fading seal that had expended its energy, or a static seal that had never had the chance to be used. One body in particular, bigger than the others, lay collapsed in the middle of a clearing. It was adorned with Akatsuki's now familiar patterned robe of dark red clouds. Puppets, he stated. Apparently Akatsuki has someone skilled in the ninja art of puppetry. Or had someone, at least. It's hard to tell. Usopp, who after some tentative prodding had begun examining some of the intricate mechanisms of the scattered dolls, looked up in surprise. Puppets. You use puppets for fighting? No, not me, but I know of a couple of people that do. But, I don't see any strings. How can these be puppets? They make strings out of their chakra, Sasuke said, making a spidery motion with his fingers. Don't ask me how. Usopp returned to his examinations, grumbling all the while. As he worked, Sasuke tried to piece together what had happened as best as was possible. It was difficult. This place had been visited by a whirlwind of destruction. Besides that, someone capable of controlling this many puppets could have devices to do just about anything. For example, was that scorch mark over there a fire jutsu or a flamethrower? Carefully, he smelled the air. Ah, that was a familiar scent. The bombs that had been thrown their way on Jaya had left smoke that smelled like this. At the very least, that bomber had been here too. Slowly, other patterns began to emerge. It appeared as though a fight had started between the puppeteer and this mystery assailant, and then other Akatsuki members had joined in afterwards. His thoughts were interrupted by Usopp, who continued their earlier conversation as if there had been no interruption. The mechanisms in this stuff are amazing, even if it does rely on crazy magic strings. Hey, Naruto. I hate to ask a favor of you like this, but do you think you could get some of your shadow guys to cart some of this stuff back to the ship? I'll make it up to you, I promise. Naruto looked around at the scattered debris and shrugged. Sure. No skin off my nose. Oh, hey, Usopp. Be careful with that stuff. Sometimes ninja put traps on their gear. Usopp dropped the puppet piece he was examining like it was on fire, jumping backwards in a hurry. Don't worry about it, man, said Naruto. I'll bring him back to the ship and we'll see what's in him later, okay? After a quick check with Sasuke to scan for chakra signatures and rule out any extremely violent traps in the remains, Naruto summoned about 20 shadow clones to help him move the more intact pieces of puppetry back to the ship. As his clones worked, Sasuke and Naruto were approached by Robin. Mr. Ninja, curious one, Robin asked, sounding somewhat more nervous than usual. Sorry to interrupt, but I have a question. Is it possible for ninjas like yourselves to control ice? Sasuke and Naruto both looked up, then shared an uncomfortable glance. Oh, yeah, it sure as hell is, said Naruto, as if reliving a painful memory. We kinda got our asses handed to us by an ice user on our first real mission out, ya know. Real pain in the butt. At this, Robin took a deep breath, then let it out. I see. That's interesting to hear. So it's fairly common, then. No, said Sasuke, actually, I think we killed the last known user of it that day. Akatsuki might have another, but I've certainly never heard of them if they do. Robin looked visibly nervous once again, causing Naruto to frown. They hadn't known her long, but this was as flustered as they had ever seen her. He had just opened his mouth to ask her a question when Luffy interrupted them, crying out from where he had been examining a boulder-sized spire of ice set in a crater in the earth. Hey, I found something. Luffy's discovery was set all alone from the other debris, and it looked as though there had been a violent explosion of earth when a massive spire of ice had erupted from underneath the ground, sending showers of dirt in every direction around the crater. Inside, frozen in the ice, a young man with Akatsuki robes and vibrant red hair was visible, his eyes wide open and staring off into the distance. Oh no, how long has he been in there? Asked Chopper. Hey, I hope you're not thinking about helping him, said Sanji, pointing a finger. Last time we tried that with Akatsuki they nearly killed us. It's alright, sighed Sasuke, releasing the Sharingan, I know it looks more like a person than any of the others, but it's just another puppet. The workmanship is so fine that the seams are hard to see through the ice, but it's not living, and there's no chakra inside it. He shook his head, exhaling a tense breath as he did so. Well, I don't know who they ran into, or if this was just internal fighting or what, but there's too much equipment here to just leave behind on a whim. It looks like Akatsuki finally ran into some actual competition, and I can't say whether this new threat is still on the island or not. As if this was what she had been waiting for, Robin called for attention. Everyone, listen. I know that I haven't been with you for long, and you don't have any real reason to trust me. Still, I don't make many requests, so I need you to listen to me with that in mind. Robin, we trust you. Why? What's wrong? Asked Nami. We need to get off of this island immediately. There's only one person I know of capable of causing this early winter. Someone far more powerful than all of us here put together. More powerful than anything we've yet seen from Akatsuki. He. Robin froze, shivering in sudden terror. Robin, Luffy said, his voice now calm and cool, who are you talking about? The sudden appearance of this new, serious Luffy caused Naruto and Sasuke some considerable degree of confusion. He's a marine, she continued, her voice imploring and passionate. If he sees us, our lives will be forfeit. You don't know what he's done, the things he's capable of. Luffy, I know that you defeated Crocodile, but this man is in an entirely different league. Robin, I'm gonna need you to tell me who this is, insisted Luffy. Sanji, ever unnecessarily chivalrous, quickly stepped up to her defense. Luffy, if she doesn't want to talk about it, she doesn't have to. We can get back to the ship and wait this out if we need to. No, none of you understand. She pleaded. There's no point to any of this tiptoeing around right now. We need to get away from here as fast as we can, even if it means leaving the island before the log pose has set. He wants me dead, and if he finds out that Robin paused, unwilling to continue. I'm not going to leave anywhere until you tell us what's going on, repeated Luffy. I agree, said a deep voice that seemed to resonate from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. If I found out, what? It would save me a lot of trouble if you went ahead and finished that sentence, Nico Robin. The crew was shocked into action. Who's there? Luffy shouted. Oh my, excuse me. The voice lost its omnipresent quality as a man leaned forward out of a nearby wall of jagged ice. Seeing the man move through the ice as if it were a part of his own body, Naruto and Sasuke had flashbacks to their past confrontation with Haku. He towered over them, though it was difficult to tell if that was because he was really 10 feet tall or if it was because he was high up inside the wall itself. The older man had curly black hair and tanned skin that was scuffed and scraped in one or two places. A white vest with a couple of missing buttons sat over a deep blue dress shirt that was singed along the cuffs. All over his exposed body, frost crackled and moved like a living organism. Robin gasped, taking a step back and tripping over a chunk of ice. I'm sorry for eavesdropping like this, he said, it's been a rather difficult day. I'm in the area investigating a series of unusual disturbances when all of a sudden I get a call bringing me here, and I run into a rather stubborn set of malcontents. I thought I'd ambush and interrogate one of them alone, but it seemed he had different plans. An unpleasant enough battle even before others joined in. It's not every month I'm forced to back down from a fight. Who would have thought I'd run into Nico Robin right on their heels? You're the one Robin was talking about, aren't you? Growled Luffy, taking an aggressive step forward. Tell me what you did to her, or I'll clean your clock. No, Luffy. Don't attack him. Please. Breathing heavily, the normally unflappable Robin struggled to compose herself. This man is a Marine Admiral. His name is Aokiji. We can't risk a fight here. No way, muttered Sanji, backing off slightly. An admiral. The Marine Admiralty is known as the Navy's greatest military asset, right? He got into a fight with Akatsuki. Hey, you jerk, shouted Usopp, suddenly cowering behind Zoro. There are other, scarier pirates around for you to go after. Like Akatsuki. If you hurry, you can catch him. Shoo, shoo. Oh my, scarier pirates for me to go after, Aokiji said, pretending to contemplate the concept with a hard look in his eyes. But I think you're quite scary enough already. It all has to do with that woman, Nico Robin. Hey, Robin's not scary. You take that back, or I'll make you regret it, shouted Luffy. Aokiji shifted, spreading his arms wide as he stepped out of his icy wall. He really was as tall as he had appeared. He also appeared to be wounded, a red spot having stained through his white vest shirt on the right side of his abdomen. Robin's wary glare intensified as the Admiral turned the conversation back to her. Aokiji had the expression of a man who already had all the answers, and was just going through the conversation as a formality. His next words, however, seemed to cast some doubt on that. Nico Robin, the man pronounced the name like a judge passing down a sentence. What is your relationship with Akatsuki? I need to know everything you told them. Think about what you're going to say very carefully, because your answer today will determine whether or not your friends live to see the inside of a cell. Canon refresh. In canon, the Straw Hats arrived on this island and helped an old man named Tonjit and his horse get to safety. Both of them are fine. Toby is always quite pleased to help the elderly. In the process, they got involved in the Davy Back fight. Afterwards, depending on whether you read the manga or watched the anime, they either met Admiral Aokiji right away or they had a buttload of filler and then they met Aokiji on a completely different island. Chapter 27. Unwavering Justice. Nico Robin, said the man looming over them all, what is your relationship with Akatsuki? I need to know everything you told them. Think about what you're going to say very carefully, because your answer today will determine whether or not your friends live to see the inside of a cell. Robin's earlier fear was augmented by a sudden bewilderment. What are you talking about? I have no relationship with them, unless you count antagonism. Really? You're practically following in their footsteps, though. We've already seen both of your groups at the poneglyph found on Jaya. I'm supposed to believe that it's not a coincidence, when Akatsuki also has a man who is capable of reading the poneglyphs. What? Shouted Robin, mouth agape and her face a portrait of shock. But they shouldn't have any connection to such things. They've only just left the sealed island. The rest of the crew was left puzzled, muttering their confusion. Half of them had never even heard the word poneglyph before, and the odd bits and pieces of cryptic lore dispensed by Robin during her scholarly musings hardly qualified the others to understand the significance of this conversation. Aokiji, for his part, gave a puzzled frown and scratched his head. Oh, my, that's an interesting response. So you really didn't know that, did you? Even after the Commodore's report I had half expected he was a second survivor from Ohara, but if there's no connection on your part, then, well, it's just that, well, never mind, it's not important. Finish your goddamn statement, shouted half the crew in unison. Naruto and Sasuke shared a perplexed glance at the uncharacteristic unity. It was as if they had all rehearsed it beforehand. Hey, come on, now, the Admiral said, raising a placating hand out in front of him. It's not like it matters, right? Sure, there might not be a connection now, but you'll be trying to join Akatsuki soon enough. Won't you, Nico Robin? Robin still looked stunned, barely able to respond. Nami was the first one to speak. What are you talking about? Joining Akatsuki? That's outrageous. They've done nothing except to try and kill us. They nearly killed her back on Jaya. I'm afraid you just don't know enough about who this woman is, and you definitely don't know what she'll do in pursuit of those stones. She's the last survivor of a cursed clan. She's been in and out of numerous pirate organizations throughout the last 2 decades, and one thing has remained a constant. Aokiji's face was now cold and impassive. Every single group she's in falls, and she remains the only one still standing at the end. The others remained focused on Aokiji, but Sasuke turned his head to regard her with a new eye. Her earlier statements to him on the ship made more sense now. The combination of shame, pride, frustration, and righteous anger twisted together in her expression was very familiar to him. Still, the Admiral said, crossing his frosted arms over his chest, even though you are all sure to be taken to pieces by her treachery, I can't really just let this situation go. How can I be sure that this woman didn't get a chance to read the Jaya poneglyph? You might all have to die. It's a shame, particularly for you, Straw Hat. You really remind me of your grandfather. Gramps, shouted Luffy, suddenly shaking in terror. Wait, interjected Naruto, before things could get silly. Okay, while I really can't imagine this guy having a grandfather, What the hell did you mean about us all having to die? Oh, she hadn't told you. Naruto growled out his response, grinding his teeth together. No, you smug asshole. She doesn't have to explain. I'm asking you. Oh my, that's something of a long story. The world government has forbidden all knowledge and study of the poneglyph stones. They can, and have, destroyed entire islands to keep them away from prying eyes. Just like we destroyed her home. The scholars of Ohara didn't know when to leave well enough alone. They grew obsessed with it, you see, and she inherited their will. Oh, she tries to hide this obsession from the people that she associates with, but the fact is that she'll betray anyone if it gets her one step closer to that forbidden knowledge. Robin was shaking now, and the mood was darkening rapidly. The Straw Hats looked like they were ready to kill the man as he continued to speak, his voice low. You certainly won't be the first who die because of her, but hopefully after I'm done here you'll be the last. Why are you doing this? Robin shrieked. If you're really so set on instigating matters, then I don't have a choice but to fight you. Robin crossed both of her arms, and numerous copies of her limbs sprouted all over Aokiji's 10-foot-tall frame, pulling the lanky man's head back and bending him almost in half. Oh my, I'm disappointed in you, Nico Robin. But, in the end, I suppose neither of us really did have a choice in the matter, did we? Then, Aokiji shattered, his body breaking into fragments of ice that fell to the ground in shards and lumps. There was no sign of blood. Ah, screamed Usopp, you killed him. You killed an admiral. Quick, get to the ship. Ninjas, hide the body. Robin backed up, casting her eyes from side to side. Everyone, she called, we need to get away from here. This might be the only chance we have to run. Please. Screams of warning interrupted her as, with a quiet cracking noise, Aokiji rose up from the ground behind her, forming out of frost and ice. Robin had only a moment to take one look back at him before he wrapped both arms around her as if in an embrace. His breath fogged in the air. Ice time. In an instant, Robin was enveloped by a cocoon of frost, her features still caught in the act of calling out in surprise. The Straw Hats began screaming her name. Relax, everyone, Aokiji said, tapping her frozen head with one finger. I've got excellent control, and she's still alive under all that. If you were to get her some help right away, she'd be fine. Then, he raised his foot, bringing it above the frozen young woman. Unless, of course, someone were to hit her like this, which would be pretty bad for her condition. Sanji pushed off the ground, leaping into melee, already spinning as he landed at the Admiral's feet. With a twist and pivot, he kicked the man right behind his knee, halting his execution strike. Grinning, the Admiral reached out to touch Sanji, which is when Zoro arrived, aiming for an amputating blow. His sword struck an icy arm yet somehow failed to cut through. Frost shot down the sword, freezing Zoro's hand to his blade. Meanwhile, Sanji yelped and retracted his leg, his shin encased in ice where it had made contact with the Admiral's body. Then, Luffy was there with them. Ducking between his two comrades, he moved to strike the Admiral's unprotected torso. Aokiji moved his remaining arm to intercept, but a thrown kunai shot through the smallest of openings between the fighters, heading straight for the Admiral's wounded abdomen. Apparently, the thought of being hit with the kunai bothered him, and his last free limb darted down to catch the knife, letting Luffy strike his chest with both fists. Gomu Gomu Bazooka. The impact drove Aokiji back half a meter, then Luffy screamed and pulled back his arms. Both hands were red and covered with frost. The giant man in front of them seemed completely unharmed by the attacks. Sanji, Zoro, and Luffy took a step back. During the confusion, Usopp had charged in and grabbed Robin's body, carrying her out of the immediate combat area. Now carrying their injured friend, he made a headlong dash back toward the ship, with Chopper and Nami following behind. Oh my, said the Admiral, I thought so. You all really are willing to go to bat for her. That's dangerous, see, because the only reason I've been able to leave her alone so long is that she's been so unsuccessful at keeping a team. Breath fogging, Aokiji turned to look at Naruto, who was now leafing through his little black book. You there. I recognize that weapon you use. The last time someone threw one of those at me, it exploded. I suppose you must be another one of those ninjas. From the looks of it, I'd guess your friend there is, too. He nodded at Sasuke. Your bad luck for getting involved with the Straw Hats, though it's actually quite convenient for me. Stick around after I deal with the rest of these pirates, will you? Hey, shouted Luffy at the top of his lungs as he stepped forward aggressively, you wanna hurt my crew? You and me. One-on-one. Nobody else. The Admiral frowned. I refuse, he stated simply. Sorry, kid, I admire your guts, but I'm not going to restrict myself when there's this much at stake. Naruto shut his tiny book with a loud clapping noise, then brought both hands together. Behind him, a rotund toad that was about twice as tall as the young ninja appeared in a puff of smoke. With wrinkled skin and a faded red coloring, the toad had an immense wooden barrel strapped to its back that was emitting steam and a fragrant smell. Aokiji watched with interest as Naruto spoke to the new arrival. Mr. Furogama, my friend went that way, he said, pointing. She's frozen and she'll need some warm water. Yes, shouted the toad in a thickly layered accent, nothing like a warm bath in the winter. But first I gotta think of you, Naruto boy. 2 hot baths, comin' right up. Hopping up and down, the frozen earth under the old toad's feet caved in with magical swiftness. Slapping both wrinkled hands together, a thick stream of hot water poured from his mouth, filling the basin in seconds. Finally, he tipped some of his barrel into the newly created pond, covering the surface of the water with fragrant medicinal herbs. Job done, the toad leapt off to intercept the medical team on their return to the ship. That should give Chopper something to work with. Oh my, said the Admiral, you ninjas really are full of tricks, aren't you? I'm kind of curious to observe them now that I don't have most of Akatsuki breathing down my neck. But, you know, it's dangerous to just toss someone hurting like that into hot water. Naruto smirked. Hey, there's a pretty smart reindeer who knows a lot about frostbite working on the problem, you know. I think he'll figure it out. Aokiji lowered his stance slightly. But it's all meaningless if I don't let anyone else leave. Naruto made a hand seal, and then the area was littered with shadow clones, the cloud of smoke obscuring the location of Naruto's real body. One distraction, coming right up, shouted one of the Narutos. Guys, if you wanna warm up, now's the time. The swarm of clones attacked, roughly half of them jumping in to engage the Admiral in close range, with the others hanging back to attack with thrown kunai. Oh my, some sort of duplicator, Aokiji said, amiably dispatching clone after clone. I'm pretty sure we have a fruit like that under our control. Maybe you do have something to show me after all. You ninjas have the strangest variety of abilities. Initially, the Admiral seemed curious, but it didn't take long for being bulrished by clones to grate on the man. As Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji warmed their frozen limbs, Sasuke watched from the sidelines, his Sharingan carefully analyzing their opponent's movements. What he saw concerned him deeply. Before he could speak, one of the Narutos nearby muttered something. This guy's ridiculous. He can see me from every angle, even when he's not looking, and it's like he's not even trying. Sasuke decided to test this, waiting until the man turned his back to throw a kunai straight at his head. The Admiral swatted it out of the air without looking. Shit, cursed Sasuke, beginning to scan the landscape. He's got some way to see attacks coming, and he hasn't taken any damage from any of our hits so far. That has to be a fake body, some sort of ice clone. He's watching us from somewhere. I hate to break it to you, said Sanji, rubbing his legs frantically, but that's just what a Logia-type fruit user is. They're pretty much invulnerable. They don't need your fancy ninja misdirection. What even the blind sight? How does ice control give him something like that? Don't ask me. Luffy was the one who fought Crocodile. Sasuke turned to Luffy. What weaknesses do these guys have? How did you beat the other one? Luffy was gnashing his teeth as he dunked his frozen arms in the hot water, blood dripping from the broken skin. That sand bastard couldn't handle getting wet. That let me beat him up. Nodding, Sasuke spoke to a nearby Naruto, who was probably a clone. Naruto, how about we heat things up a bit? He asked. Naruto grinned and tapped his black book. Hells yes. I've got just the thing, too. We'll make this a 3-part attack. Let's make it 4, said Sasuke. Zoro, give us that wind move of yours. Once more, Naruto clapped his hands to summon a toad out of thin air, this one with dull yellow skin. Naruto, Sasuke, and the toad, Gamatsu, huddled together for a moment. Then, Gamatsu stepped forward and vomited an intense stream of dark fluid into the melee. Gamma Yudan, toad oil bullet. At the same time, the two Konoha teens flickered their fingers through a number of seals, before leaning back and taking mighty breaths. Kaden. Goukakyu no Jutsu, Fire Release. Grand Fireball Technique. Fuuton. Hiryuhu, Wind Release. Airstream Cannon. Lunging forward, Sasuke shot an immense jet of flame from his open mouth, meeting the stream of toad oil on its way to the target. The blaze leaving Sasuke's lips intensified upon setting the oil alight. An instant later, Naruto joined in, blowing a tightly controlled maelstrom of swirling wind into the mix. Seeing the attack begin, Zoro added his strength, sending a triple helix of wind chakra straight into the flames. Hyaku Hachi Pondo Hu, 108-pound Phoenix. When the four attacks met, the storm of fire began to burn white-hot, quickly expanding and covering the distance between them and the preoccupied admiral. Aokiji's eyes widened for just a moment, seeing at least a dozen of Naruto's clones smirk before vanishing under the rolling cloud of flames that now covered an area almost 200 feet wide. The man pivoted on the spot to deal with the incoming blaze. Oh my, what's with all the fire users today? Let's see if you're as hot as the last guy who tried to make me melt. Wait, let me rephrase th. Then, the world was engulfed in a hellstorm. The non-ninja component of the Going Merry watched in horror as the three shinobi fighters plus Zoro covered most of the battlefield in fatal flames. That's so awesome, said Luffy, eyes alight in the reflected fire. Holy hell, muttered Sanji, mouth agape as he finished warming his leg. Remind me not to ask them for a light. That guy's gotta be in bad shape after something like that. No, I don't think so, murmured Zoro. Sure enough, as the flames began to recede, the form of the admiral remained, reforming from solid ice, thick droplets of meltwater the only sign of the intense heat he had just endured. Well, that, and the fact that he was now grabbing his already wounded side. Okay, I'll admit, he said, wincing, that was better than I had expected. Not as good as what that other fire and wind guy tried, but I didn't enjoy. Aokiji's words were interrupted as several Narutos behind him whipped kunai in his direction, aiming for his bloody abdomen. He knocked them out of the air, then flicked shards of ice-like bullets to disperse the clones. In moments, even more Naruto clones had swarmed him. Naruto's summoned toad disappeared amidst the mayhem, disappointed by the failure. Sasuke watched the aftermath of this with a growing terror. The man was invincible. That was literally the most powerful fire attack he had, and if that wasn't enough to hurt Aokiji, then he only had the Tsukuyomi left. Would it even matter? Sasuke had never really considered the Tsukuyomi to have a weakness before, but now one was staring him straight in the face. Use of the technique in combat assumed that you were capable of killing your opponent after they were thrown off balance, and Sasuke wasn't sure he could kill this man even if he were to lay down and take his attacks without fighting back. That assumed that he could even handle torturing a stranger in the first place, which he wasn't sure about. Despite his earlier words, the man seemed to be holding back, and the one thing Sasuke was certain of was that if he tortured this man for 3 days inside the Tsukuyomi, then when he came out he would be mad enough to kill them for real. No, more importantly, why was he considering wasting Itachi's eye if running away was a better option? Luffy, do we run? He asked. The captain answered with a fierce nod. Everyone, let's scram. Oh, no you don't, chastised the admiral, stomping his foot. When his foot impacted the ground, numerous spears of ice shot up, stabbing through each and every one of the Naruto clones that remained in close combat. Sasuke winced, never being completely sure which clone was going to turn out to be Naruto's real body, but they all exploded in puffs of smoke. There were only a few clones left by Sasuke now. Suddenly free, the man bent over, and a line of crackling ice shot out in the direction of their ship, miles away. As the ice moved, it forked once, sending another line straight to the hot spring that Zoro, Sanji, and Luffy had just been using to heat up. At the same time, far out of sight, the Going Merry stopped rocking in the waves as a bridge of ice froze it to the shore. The admiral stood back up before them, looming over the battlefield. His breath froze the air, and he now looked no worse off than when they had started. Ah, he moaned, My motto is lazy justice, and I'm tired of this already. Look, I just froze your ship in place, so take a hint and stop running around for a second, alright? No, on second thought, you know what? Aokiji interrupted his own sentence by disappearing, and Sasuke whipped his head to the side, barely able to track him with the Sharingan. In an instant, Sanji, Zoro, and Luffy were all frozen over. It was only Sasuke and about a dozen assorted Narutos left standing now. Looking bored, the Admiral waved them over. Hey, you can take your friends off to the other bath now, alright? I left that one unfrozen, so just get them out of here and I'll let them live. They're out of this fight either way, and there's a convoy of Marines ready to land in just a few minutes. Let's just chill for a moment. The assorted Narutos shared a glance, and 3 of them darted off to carry away the frozen trio. As they did, the Admiral rubbed the back of his neck. This is such a pain. Look, I don't think you 2 ninjas have anything more to show me that Akatsuki didn't already try, so it's about time we ended this. I'm quite capable of freezing this entire island from the ground up, you know. I highly suggest you surrender now. Sasuke clenched his teeth as he glared back at the other man. If you're this powerful, he asked, then why didn't you stop Akatsuki from leaving the island like you did us? The man sighed, scratching his head. Because I still don't know how they managed to hurt me, that's why. I'm hoping that you 2 can shed some light on that. I was skirmishing with several of them quite handily until the man in the driftwood mask arrived, and then all of a sudden, well, you know, it's like he was, you know what, never mind, it's not important. This guy, Sasuke decided, was really pissing him off. Time to try something. The Tsukuyomi was a king among genjutsu for its power, but the Sharingan could generate other illusions as well. Ironically, it might be a lesser genjutsu that saved them this time. Concentrating, he began to prepare an illusion. First, he turned to the few remaining Naruto clones near him. Naruto, I need to know which one of you is the real one. Each of the assembled Narutos looked apologetic for a moment. Yeah, about that. I'm not playing around, Naruto. Yelled Sasuke, still forming his illusion in his mind. I'm not playing around either, said the tall man across from them. In fact, I'm seriously about to start hurting you 2. You have 5 seconds to surrender. Well, it was now or never. Taking a moment to concentrate on the illusion, he looked Aokiji in the eye and established a link with his chakra. It was easy. The man didn't even know he wasn't supposed to meet the eyes of an Uchiha. A second later Sasuke felt a disruption in the man's chakra system and then Aokiji blinked, a haze of confusion glazing over his eyes as he began to see what Sasuke wanted him to see. It wouldn't last long without Sasuke staying to reinforce the illusion, but they had an opening. Slowly, Aokiji began to crackle and snap as his body turned to ice piece by piece, some automatic reflex still protecting him. Sasuke turned to a surprised Naruto. Let's go. We're leaving. The real one's not here, dude. I'll tell him we're ready to go. Swiftly, the clone moved to disperse itself and return the information it had learned to the original body, but it was too late. The ground beneath the Admiral exploded, disgorging a screaming blonde ninja. In his hand, he carried an enormous swirling ball of air that tore a ragged hole through the earth as it seemed to pull him upwards all on its own. Ninpo. Oodama Rasengan. It was like seeing ice cubes being fed into a shaved ice machine. The ball of wickedly spinning chakra tore the Admiral to pieces, shards of frost scattering everywhere in the chaotic windstorm. When it was done, the real Naruto gave Sasuke a thumbs up and started running his way. Sasuke saw the attack incoming, but didn't even have time to open his mouth. 2 hands emerged from the rapidly freezing ground, grabbing Naruto's legs. Ice time. In an instant, Naruto's body was frozen over, both legs frozen to the ground. His body didn't disappear like the other clones had. Aokiji straightened up gingerly, still favoring his side, ice crystals fogging from his mouth. I told you both how this was going to go, he murmured, brushing scattered dust off of his jacket. Deep in a chamber of abyssal darkness, a slumbering beast stirred and opened one malevolent eye. Chapter 28. Breaking the Ice. Inside. Brat. Naruto floated in the darkness, his awareness closing down around him. His vision was going ragged around the edges. Vaguely, in the background, He heard screams and the sound of fighting, but drowning it all out was a sense of permeating cold that took his breath away. Brat. Something was beating on his consciousness like a migraine headache, demanding to be noticed. Brat. Whoa. What the hell? All of a sudden his feet touched the ground, splashing into shockingly cold water. Jolted to full awareness, he spun around, trying to get his bearings. He stood in a shadowed room before an immense cage. The sound of water resonated throughout the area, slowly dripping from some unknown location. The walls of the jail in front of him were vast, but behind him was what appeared to be a dome of abyssal blackness. There was just nothing at all back there. That same blackness filled the inside of the cage in front of him, and Naruto felt a moment of raw panic. He knew, somehow, that this cage was meant to hold something truly dangerous, but all of a sudden he was uncertain whether he was outside the cell looking in or on the inside with whatever was trapped there. This was a very, very crucial distinction. Just as his panic reached a crescendo, there was movement on the other side of the bars. A lip twitched aside to reveal mottled gums and the tip of a monstrous fang. An eyelid lifted, revealing the baleful red gaze underneath. Like a veil being pushed back, a slight motion from the titanic beast caused the shadows to recede just enough to reveal orange-red fur and the barest hints of a predator as large as a mountain. As Naruto's eyes widened in shock, an inhumanly deep voice resonated throughout this nowhere space. Curb your uselessness and stop gawking. Holy shit. What is? You're the Kyuubi. You've gotta be. Naruto exclaimed. Oh god, is this a dream? Is this real? Is this where you break free and kill everyone? What the hell's going? Silence. The great beast roared, its mouth opening in a snarl that made the hall shake, waves cresting on the thin layer of water that covered the floor. This is no dream, brat. Do not test my patience. This is the cell where you humans have condemned me to rot. I will not tolerate any inane prattle from you when we both know how this meeting will go. Somehow, when the demon spoke, it did so without making sound or moving its mouth, the words arriving directly in his head as if by magic. Its deep voice sounded superior, insulting, intelligent, and murderous. Reacting automatically to the smug attitude, Naruto scowled and stepped forward, returning the monster's horrific stare with one of his own. What makes you think you know anything about how this is going to go, huh? I know enough. Your friends are in danger, and I can feel in your heart just how much that pains you. You're far away from both home and from help. You're going to die frozen like a little insect caught outside in the winter. Pathetic. Okay, admitted Naruto, maybe I do need help, but not like this. I know what you want. I'm not stupid. The demon growled slightly, indicating its feelings on the matter. You're not gonna convince me to let you out and kill everyone around me just because I might be dying. Ignorant whelp. I said I had no time for prattle. I already know how this is going to go, but it seems I overestimated your meager intelligence. Your friends are out there right now fighting the menace that defeated you. I can lend you my power as I have done before, but without my help they will die, and then so will you. Naruto winced. Yeah, sure, I know that, but that guy said he wasn't going to kill everyone. The demon scoffed, the noise sounding like a bomb exploding. You should feel foolish for believing that. Humans never amass such power by refusing to kill and control those around them. No, you must take my power or leave yourself at the mercy of a killer. In the end, what choice is there? What the hell do you care about it? You got a crush on someone out there or something. Again, the Nine Tails roared, shaking the room and shattering flakes of ice down from unseen heights. Who, boy, did I hit the mark? A mortal like yourself can have no understanding of my motivations. I could speak to you of the cycle of disincarnation and reincarnation that would occur upon the death of your body, but it would have no meaning. I could teach you pain beyond your comprehension, but you could fathom only a minuscule fraction of it. Suffice it to say that I would find your death unpleasant. Okay, yeah, talking about that does sound like a waste of time. Then why don't we just get this over with? You wanna give me more power like we've done before? Sure, I can take whatever you've got. Now, the fox rose slightly from his languid rest. Then we shall keep this simple. I shall grant you a fraction of my immortal power that would make even a god tremble, and you will not waste my time further. Drink deep, young one, and show this new world the weight of my miracles. Sasuke stared across the distance at the stern figure of the admiral. After Naruto had been frozen, every attack he had launched had been rebuffed, and the only thing Sasuke had to show for it was frostburn and bruised limbs. Nothing he had done had convinced the man to move from his spot beside his best friend's form. The last clone that Naruto had left on the battlefield stood beside Sasuke as the standoff continued. With an uncomfortable grimace, the clone spoke to him. Look, Sasuke, in case this doesn't turn out well for me, I wanna make sure you get out of this alright, ya know. Just surrender if it comes down to it. This guy's a monster, and you shouldn't. Sasuke interrupted him. Yeah, I get it, okay. I'm not done yet. One last attempt, then it was time to try the Tsukuyomi. The admiral was even now trying to avoid eye contact, something he clearly wasn't used to, but Sasuke was convinced he could get enough of a glimpse to use that technique. He had no illusions that he'd be able to defeat this monster of a man even with the advantage the Mangekyo would afford him, but maybe with 3 days to talk things over he could at least convince him to let Naruto live. Sasuke was livid at the thought of being toyed with like this, but he could bow his head and plead if it was for his best friend. The young Uchiha opened his mouth one last time, preparing to shoot a jet of flame to melt the ice, praying that Naruto's preternatural toughness and healing would let him survive the experience. With a disapproving click of his tongue, Aokiji disappeared, crossing the 50 or so feet between them in between breaths. He slapped one hand over the Uchiha's mouth, and when he removed it Sasuke's lips were sealed by a patch of solid ice. Grunting, Sasuke quickly stopped gathering his chakra, not wanting flames to shoot out of his nose. With the same hand, Aokiji grabbed Sasuke by the throat, lifting him up into the air. An instant later, his other fist shot out, erasing the last remaining Naruto clone without effort. Sasuke, who had already been breathing heavily, gasped and took a panicked breath through his nose. This man was ridiculous. The lanky admiral was so incredibly long-limbed that even being held in one outstretched arm he was still almost 4 feet away, far enough that he wouldn't even be invading his personal space. Except for the whole choking thing. Aokiji nodded, apparently to no one, still avoiding eye contact. Relax, kid, I know what I said about killing you guys, but I'm not out to exterminate you two in particular unless I have to. In a way, you and the Straw Hats are lucky. I've actually got some backup arriving who'll make sure you all get taken into custody alive. He paused for a moment, and Sasuke choked down some more air. Though, I'm sorry to say that we're not letting you go. We absolutely need to know more about this Akatsuki group, and you two are the only ones around who might have anything more to offer than speculation. Like I said, you're bad luck for getting involved with the Straw Hats, I suppose. Sasuke's eyes flicked over the man's shoulder to glance at Naruto. Streams of red, malevolent chakra were twisting and coiling about him. That was both worrying and relieving. Naruto drawing on his inner demon didn't happen often, but when it did things got dangerous rather quickly. At least Naruto was alive. Aokiji took Sasuke's worried glance as one of concern for his friend. He'll be fine, kid. At least, he'll be fine if I help melt him out of there. And I guess that depends on if you're ready to talk or not. What do you say, will you come with us? The admiral's grip loosened a fraction, but in the next moment things changed. In an instant, all of the ice surrounding Naruto flashed to steam. He was pissed. Naruto's eyes were red, his facial markings were more pronounced, and he was surrounded by a thin red cloud of mist. Roaring, he launched himself straight at the admiral, covering the distance in a single leap. Aokiji barely had enough time to drop Sasuke and start to twist in place before the enraged boy swung his clawed hand, striking the man's wound with titanic force. From the brief look of shock on Aokiji's face, it was clear that he had expected to turn into ice at the moment of impact. That didn't happen. Letting out a strangled scream, the tall man shot across the terrain, bouncing and tumbling along the ground until he came to rest among a thin patch of snow-covered trees hundreds of feet away. Naruto, winced Sasuke, once he had ripped the ice from his raw and bleeding mouth. Good to see you, man. We need to get out of here, now. No way, growled Naruto, not while he's still around to follow us. Damn it. It was impossible to deal with him when he got like this. Before he could be stopped, Naruto dashed off to chase the fallen form of the Marine Admiral. Far in the distance, Aokiji was already getting to his feet, grimacing in pain. The strike that would have disemboweled an ordinary man had torn his jacket apart and exposed the wound, which had reopened and widened considerably from the assault. Oh my, that's going to leave a mark, he muttered, then his face hardened. Naruto arrived, lunging in at superhuman speeds. With a quick pivot, Aokiji dodged the attack and snatched the boy out of the air as if he were a misbehaving cat, grabbing him by the collar of his jacket. Naruto had one moment to panic before the man had him in his grasp. Deep freeze. Sasuke could only scream as Naruto froze solid and dropped to the ground with a final, heavy thump. Brat. Ah. Shit, cursed Naruto. The sinister surroundings of his inner prison were now breathtakingly cold, frost creeping in down along the walls. Icicles were forming before his eyes, somehow defying gravity and growing upwards like stalagmites. That couldn't be good. He found himself shivering almost immediately. You're back here in record time. Are you really so useless? You're supposed to take better care of our body. Naruto glared at the demon fox inside its cage. Well, gee, I dunno, jackass, but despite receiving a mortal power that makes even the gods tremble, or whatever, it didn't actually seem to help me one goddamn bit, now did it? The fox roared, the vibrations cracking ice and sending Naruto to his knees. Brat, stop being worthless and listen. You are dying. Your heart is being frozen at this very instant. Any normal human, no matter how tough they were, would be dead right now. Remember how I said that I didn't want to get caught in a dying body just a few moments ago? That is still true. Naruto gradually uncovered his ears. Okay, so give me more of that energy. If your power isn't enough to beat him, then I'll use it to run instead. My power is enough to reduce him to ash, human. Listen to me. This is not a problem that can be solved with just a little more chakra fed to a human worm. You are dying. I'm not gonna let you out even if I am dying, you nine-tailed pain in the ass, so shove it. What else can we do about this? Such small-mindedness. No compromise. Even the last Jinchuriki drew upon my power more often than you. You remember my mom. Now something else entered the demon's voice. Not fondness, or nostalgia, or familiarity, nor even the tone of recollection. If anything, it just sounded like someone shrewdly grasping an opportunity that had been handed them. Remember her? I was inside her for barely an instant in the grand scheme of things. I'm sure I couldn't possibly recall her name. Naruto winced at the demon's phrasing, but decided against bringing that part up. You don't even remember her name. Like, really? It was Kushina. And why should I have cared about something like that? Now the demon shifted, lifting one claw to point to Naruto. You have far more pressing concerns than names to worry about, human. Your kin at least knew the wisdom of drawing upon my power when in need, and now is as dire a need as you have ever faced. Hey, can you blame me for being careful? My teacher told me that until I was fully trained, drawing on too much of your power would make me go crazy and start killing my friends. Then I shall make it simple for you. If you do not let out my power, then you will freeze to death. Accept, and you risk harming your friends. Refuse, and you will all certainly die. The Kyuubi focused his gaze on Naruto again. Make your choice. Naruto closed his eyes and gave this some thought as the room grew colder and colder. Soon, it became too difficult to think through the cold, his teeth chattering against his will. All right, let's do it, he said, reaching out to the cell. All of a sudden he stopped. What is wrong? Wait, I told you my mother's name, but what's your name? Is it just Kyuubi, or? The demon growled in irritation. Stop delaying. Now is not the time for your delusions. Sheesh, all right. Sasuke screamed as he saw his friend fall once more, his life force fading away in his sight. Naruto. Aokiji watched the frozen boy with a wary gaze. Concentrating for a moment, he turned the wounded part of his abdomen to ice. Fighting with a frozen side would limit his mobility, but it was better than bleeding out. The child's brutal assault had definitely forced open his wound further, and there were very few people in the world who could say that they had done that to an admiral. Naruto was now frozen down to his very core, but it was worth being cautious. He took a step back before turning to the other ninja. So, he called out to the distant boy, you want to explain to me what just happened there, or? Fuck you, you cold-hearted bastard. Yeah, I thought not. Sorry, kid, but that's what happens when you push the authorities too far, Sensing a disturbance beside him, the Admiral turned to look at Naruto's body. Eyes opening wide in shock, he leapt backwards hundreds of feet, immediately putting some distance between him and the mysterious transforming teenager. His worries were well-founded. Just as swiftly as Naruto's life had faded, Sasuke saw the pathways of his chakra flare up as the Kyuubi began dumping more and more energy into his frozen body. The chakra ripped out of Naruto's form, a primal scream echoing through the air. Ice flashed once again to steam, but this time it was happening so quickly that the deep freeze wasn't melting evenly. In seconds, the ice began breaking off of his body, taking frozen chunks of his skin with it. Soon, Naruto was surrounded by the aura of chakra that had sustained him earlier, forming a thick shroud that now also sprouted a single tail of energy from his back. His face was being even more strongly affected now, his lips turning black and his whisker-like markings growing more and more pronounced. Naruto roared, slamming the earth over and over with a power that shook their bones. Aokiji watched with awe in his eyes. Oh my. What is it with you ninjas and your tricks? Though, I suppose this is a bit much to call it just a trick. Ripping a tremendous chunk of the frozen ground from the earth itself, Naruto flung the massive projectile and immediately charged in after it. Before it could strike home, a wicked fang of ice the size of a small ship speared forward from the ground, impaling the thrown object in midair. With another motion, the Admiral summoned a series of winged ice birds that accelerated to nearly sonic speeds, each one soaring straight for Naruto like a living missile. Naruto dodged wildly back and forth to avoid several of them, but when the first one struck him it melted and then refroze on contact, slowing his limbs as it wrapped itself around his body. Once slowed, a dozen more added their mass to his bindings until he resembled something more like a frozen, spiky boulder. Vibrating and screaming, the ice cracked and steamed from the acidic heat emanated from his body until he finally broke free. Seeing this, the Admiral altered his tactics, summoning different birds to continue the attack. These ones didn't melt, but instead drove into him as solid, unyielding ice that slammed the young man back with each sonic impact and tore deep into his body. Each gash and slash began healing right before their eyes, the blood mixing with the cloud of chakra around him until it seemed to thicken and turn a darker red. What the hell is with you people? Exclaimed Aokiji as he continued his artillery bombardment. Are you all just free to make up whatever powers you want? Give it up, kid. I don't want to hurt you. Naruto roared his frustration as the cloak of bloody energy slowly thickened from the continued onslaught, and soon a second tail of energy began to emerge to join the first. Aokiji watched this with an exasperated sigh, then he raised both hands to the sky. 4 walls of thick ice erupted from the ground around Naruto, topping off with an immense frozen boulder that crushed Naruto down into the dirt. Ice locker. The scream from the inside this makeshift prison was now almost completely inhuman. As the sound washed over the island, the walls that restrained him shook and rattled, and then the ground cracked as everything within 100 feet of it suddenly collapsed, freeing the demon as the cage caved in. The two-tailed beast screamed again and then shot forward on all fours, finally reaching its target with claws bared. It attacked with incredible ferocity, but its mindless, bestial attacks were finding the battle-hardened Admiral a tough opponent to land a hit on. Still, it's very difficult to fight a berserker when you're trying not to kill them. Hey, quit it. Goddammit kid. Stop fighting. Wah. Aokiji ducked and dodged to avoid the beast in close range, and then a third arm of red energy formed from its back, forcing him to block the unexpected slash. The Admiral's skin burned and blistered where the attack made contact. Sasuke could only watch in horror as the superhuman battle continued. Was that really Naruto? He could barely imagine his best friend as this kind of horrific monster. The Admiral and the Kyuubi were fighting at ridiculous speeds, the wide landscape shattering, freezing, and burning in their wake. Entranced, it was a moment before Sasuke noticed someone approaching from behind. A heavy impact accompanied Luffy's arrival as he landed from a long jump. The captain was clearly wounded, his skin cracked, red, and bleeding in numerous places from the onslaught of cold he had sustained. It looked like he'd just jumped into the hot water and let it burn the ice off of him. Still, he was there, standing beside Sasuke as they watched this horrifying fight. Sasuke looked at him in shock. He had already seen Luffy risk his life for his crew, but he couldn't fathom what had brought the man back to fight the Admiral when he and Naruto were the only ones left out here. "That's him?" asked Luffy. "That red beast thing?" "Luffy, why are you here? Get back to the ship. You can't just fight everything you see and hope to get away with it. Your crew needs you." When the bloody captain turned his way, Sasuke took a step back in surprise. Luffy's eyes were burning, his face grim. Sasuke had certainly seen more frightening displays of emotion before, but never one so surprising as finally glimpsing the core of steel beneath this man's whimsical and quixotic exterior. In the background, Aokiji erected a tremendous wall to gain some breathing room. The Kyuubi's claws struck the ice like cannonfire, tearing the wall into broken pieces with a series of horrendous impacts that shook the entire island. Luffy didn't even blink at the carnage. "I know my crew needs me," he said, "that's why I'm here. We don't leave our crew behind, Sasuke." "You. What?" Sasuke could barely believe what he was hearing. "Luffy, this isn't the time for jokes. We've barely been with you for 2 weeks. Is this just about you wanting ninjas on your crew? Is that it? You're already part of us. You just don't know it yet." "No. Naruto and I are members of Konoha's Team 7, and..." Sasuke stopped. That wasn't true, was it? He wouldn't be going back to Konoha ever again. But the instant he accepted becoming a part of another team, Naruto would know that his best friend wouldn't be coming back with him. Was this really going to be his great disappearance strategy? This would be how he'd evade Anbu. He'd just wander around with a bunch of notorious pirates wanted by the world government. What would Itachi think of this? Somehow, he was reminded of his brother's smile. "You're leaving home, aren't you?" asked Luffy, interrupting his thoughts. "I saw it in your eyes. I can tell Naruto doesn't know yet, and I'm about ready to kick your ass for not telling him. But all that doesn't matter right now, cause you're both with us, and that means we're gonna get him out of there." End of story. Off in the distance, Aokiji continued retreating from the fight, erecting a series of walls between him and the rampaging beast. "What a pain," he said. "I'm not going to put up with this shit anymore. My motto is, lazy justice, not, fight demons for fun. You too, Straw Hat and whoever you are. You'd better get this boy to stop fighting me, or else I'll kill him for real and damn the consequences. I'll destroy this entire island if I have to in order to beat him, you and your crew included. Consider this your final warning." With those words, he melted back into a nearby ice formation, disappearing from view entirely. The Kyuubi raged as it looked around for its missing opponent. Sasuke swallowed a lump in his throat. "Luffy, I don't." "Usopp's the sniper," interrupted Luffy, speaking with complete certainty. "Sanji's the cook. Chopper's the doctor. Robin's the archaeologist. Nami's the navigator. Zoro's the swordsman. Naruto's the entertainer. And Sasuke, you're the lookout. The Straw Hat Pirates won't leave a single member behind, no matter what." Sasuke had no words. Gazing off towards the two-tailed demon, Luffy cracked his bleeding knuckles. "Come on, Sasuke. We have to get our crew member back." Ahead, the Kyuubi started slicing every ice formation larger than a boulder into tiny pieces. "Damn you!" shouted Sasuke, confusion suddenly replaced with anger. "What's wrong with you? What can we even do to stop that thing? What can we do that that monster of a man couldn't?" Then Sasuke remembered. Weeks earlier. The mind's eye. In the evening the cicadas played their song, and two brothers watched the setting sun with their feet dangling in the still waters of the pond. "So you're friends with the Nine-Tails brat?" asked Itachi, smiling an unusual smile. "That's kind of surprising." "I wish you wouldn't call him a brat," chuckled Sasuke, moving his feet idly through the water. "That feels weird. He's as old as me, for one thing. For that matter, I think we're both just a bit older than you were when you died." Itachi laughed softly. "I hope you never become as old as me, Sasuke. Still, Uzumaki Naruto, huh? All I knew about him was that he was an annoying little kid who couldn't stand not being the center of attention." "Yes, that's right," agreed Sasuke. "I see," he chuckled. "So nothing's changed, then. Good. Good. I imagine he's made life fun for you." Sasuke couldn't stop himself from laughing. "You could say that." He paused, thinking for a moment. I remember one time we were on a mission to spy on some shinobi from Sand. We were supposed to uncover some weapon caches they were storing at the border, so we tracked some of these shinobi down to a tavern and wanted to listen in on their conversations. Sasuke paused, and Itachi nodded for him to continue. Sakura and I transformed into some bland-looking people in the corner where I could read their lips, but Naruto had the bright idea to switch himself out with a village tanuki statue that had been standing nearby their table so that he could get himself set up right behind them. Then, a bunch of their friends came in and started drinking, so our targets decided to stick around for a lot longer than we thought they would. Alright, so, asked Itachi. Well, half an hour later I look over and Naruto's starting to lose control of the transformation. It's kind of his weakest skill, which is why he normally goes for non-human things if he can. Sasuke paused, suddenly uncomfortably aware of both where this story was going as well as that he was telling it to his stoic brother. Tanuki have these huge, well, you know, they're known for their balls, said Itachi. Sasuke choked a little bit on his next words, then laughed. Yeah, balls. So, I look over and the wooden statue's balls are twice the size they started at. Over the next 10 minutes they just kept growing and growing. No, said Itachi, a slight grin on his lips. Suddenly everyone starts making a fuss and a couple of ladies start screaming. They're all pointing and gasping, and his balls just keep growing larger and larger. Then some old men start talking about it being a sign of an ill omen, so they start praying to it. Now, Itachi was snorting, resting his head in one palm. Finally the Sand Shinobi got spooked and decided to check up on the hidden cache, so Sakura and I followed them right to it. To this day Naruto still insists it was all part of his plan. Itachi burst out into laughter, and Sasuke joined in. Maybe he hadn't known his brother all that well, after all. As things calmed down, Itachi tried to get things back on track. Okay, so I was right. I'm glad you have him around, but there's something I should help you with. I know you'll be leaving the village, but the Kyuubi is a dangerous creature and you should be able to use my eye to help you suppress it in case of an emergency. You never know. Actually, Kakashi also tried to teach me something like this, but he admitted he really wasn't sure if it would work. Neither am I, to be honest. Or rather, I know it will work, but there's a difference between suppressing a tailed beast's chakra in theory and in actual combat. Here, let me show you. Remembering those 3 days with his brother made Sasuke freeze in place for a moment, the breath hitching in his throat. In the distance, the Kyuubi continued to shatter ice around it, a third nub of energy signaling the very beginnings of a third tail. Sasuke turned to Luffy. You're right, said Sasuke, as he clenched his fists, I'm never going back to Konoha. I don't know what I want to do with my life yet, and I'm not going to just join up with you guys just because you said so, but I'm done with doing missions for a village that wants me dead. Despite all of that, I'm not done with my friends. Luffy nodded. That's good, 'cause I'd hate your guts otherwise. Ahead, the Kyuubi finally turned their way. Lowering its head, it began to snarl, the noise thrumming across their nerves. There is something we can do. If you're willing. Sasuke met the other man's eyes, and when the captain's hard gaze didn't waver, he continued, I can get him back to normal. I just need him distracted for a minute. Luffy's grin was nearly as feral and anticipatory as the beast that was now staring back at them. I bet I can help with that, he said. The Kyuubi roared, and Luffy roared back, then repeated the beast's earlier feat by slamming both fists into the ground, ripping out a massive chunk of frozen earth that was the size of a small hill and lobbing it straight at the demon. It was a display of physical strength unlike any other Sasuke had seen before. Slicing the air with its claws, the Kyuubi cut the projectile into 6 pieces and shattered the parts that came his way, but by then Luffy was already into medium range. He stuck with tremendous force over and over, each punch driving the beast back. Far from holding back to keep Naruto safe, Luffy was moving faster and attacking harder than Sasuke had ever seen him. Whenever his fists struck flesh, Luffy's skin smoked and burned, but the man didn't waver. When the Kyuubi launched him away, he bounced right back moments later, bleeding even more than before. Defying all logic, Luffy seemed to only be getting stronger and faster the more damage he took. Sasuke knew what he had to do, and he hadn't wasted a single moment of Luffy's attack. Closing his eyes, he breathed deep, connecting to the well of his chakra. Then, he opened his eyes, his irises swirling from their normal blackness into the patterns of the Sharingan, finally ending when his left eye blossomed into the pattern of the Mangekyo. Fixing his gaze on the beast, he winced as its horrifying chakra washed over him. It was like staring into a biting snowstorm, or smoke on the wind. As Luffy dodged and struck, the earth breaking from the fury of their clash, Sasuke focused on the creature's eyes. As it whirled around to catch up with the wildly evading rubber man, the Kyuubi made eye contact for the briefest of moments. Sasuke gasped from the fiery impact of energy, forcing himself to keep it together. Even just an instant steeped in its power was enough to hurt him. Well, at least he knew what he had to be ready for now. Filled with resolution, he brought both hands together and focused his gaze once more on the beast, gathering chakra for one momentous effort. With an overwhelming strike, the Kyuubi smacked Luffy out of midair, sending him crashing into the earth to dig a trough 100 feet long. Screaming in rage, it prepared to follow up the attack. It was now or never. "Hey, demon!" Sasuke shouted, half expecting to need to say something wittier or at least more annoying to get its attention. His worry was unnecessary. The Kyuubi still wearing Naruto's barely visible form turned to him with a quick twitch of its head. Sasuke locked eyes with the beast, and then the world became a tunnel of fire.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.